morning, friends. It's Conservative Cat. Today, we're going to be coming together in grief. Today's show is not going to be easy. We are going to be talking about the Minnesota church massacre and more specifically, why trans shooters are becoming America's deadly trend. This is a trend. I'm going to come out and say it now. I mean, I think it's acceptable to say that this is now becoming a trend where trans individuals or non-binary individuals, whatever, members of the LGBTQ community, they are becoming shooters. And it's become evident at this point. And any news outlet that did not disclose the identity of the shooter, the only reason why they don't disclose the identity is because they don't want you to know that this is becoming a trend. It's a deadly trend. So we're going to get to that this morning. We are also going to be talking about how Illinois kids are at risk. DCFS, allegedly they are sending interns to investigate families. Interns, so people who aren't licensed. The children could be in danger. This is what State Representative Jed Davis warns of. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that today. We're also going to be talking about McLean County and how they love mail-in voting. I stumbled across an article. I read through it and read some quotes, and that should worry you. If your election officials, your election authority is coming out and saying that they love mail-in ballots and that they are opposed to the Trump administration and their fight against mail-in ballots. Really, that's what Trump is doing. He's trying to fight against mail-in ballots. The DOJ is asking for voter rolls. You know, they're trying to provide some oversight, some transparency, because there is a lot of distrust in our election system since the mail-in ballots have really started. And you would think that these election authorities, being that there's so much distrust, that they would be all on board for eliminating mail-in ballots, because that is what the Trump administration ultimately, I believe, wants to do, is eliminate mail-in ballots. This was a thing in 2020 COVID. They used it to steal the 2020 election. So there's no reason for it anymore. Okay. Mail-in ballots, we didn't have them literally since the beginning of time, like since we started this whole thing, like known as the democratic process of voting. We've never used mail-in ballots, absentee ballots for those across the country, serving our country overseas, military men and women overseas. We've used it for them. There's no reason why we have to use universal mail-in ballots. And if your election officials are proponents of mail-in ballots, that should worry you. That means that they don't give a damn about election integrity and about whether their constituency has trust in the election system. Because I'll tell you right now, the distrust started when the mail-in ballots started. So if you want to restore trust in the system, perhaps get rid of the mail-in ballots. Okay. So friends, we are coming together in grief today. This is going to be really hard for me. It's going to be hard for me. It's going to be hard for Christians to deliver the story today in Minneapolis, inside Annunciation Catholic School. This is where the sanctuary, you know, it was supposed to be a safe place, a place of safety. 2 children, just 8 and 10 years old. They were bowing their little heads in prayer. And in the middle of Mass, as families prayed, as teachers gathered, students, closed their little eyes in prayer, gunfire rips through the stained glass windows, and 2 children, the children never stood a chance. Okay, these 2 children, 8 and 10 years old, they were shot. And they were killed in the pews where they were whispering their amens. And then there were 14 children wounded. And then there were 3 adults who were wounded. So from what I understand, it was just the 2 who died. I might have those numbers wrong. Like I said, reporting on mass shootings are hard because it's very volatile. And, you know, of the people who were wounded, it could go a different direction. Where they lose their life tragically. So if my numbers are wrong, if you guys heard something else, throw it in the comments section. That's the latest numbers that I got. So 14 children wounded, 3 adults, 2 children dead, 8 and 10. And I wish I could tell you that this was a senseless act, and I wish that I could tell you that there was no motive here. There definitely was a motive. I wish that this was a tragedy without motive. But friends, this was not a random outburst. This was targeted. It was hatred. It was hatred specifically of Christians, of Jewish people. And it's a hatred of the God of Israel, a hatred of America itself. Okay, so the shooter has been identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman, born Robert Westman. He legally changed his name in 2020 after identifying as transgender. So in hours before the massacre, Westman, what he had done, he uploaded a manifesto-style YouTube video, 2 YouTube videos. One showed a notebook, and he just kind of thumbed through the notebook. There were like dark scribbles. I couldn't quite exactly make out what was in it. Words of despair, mostly. And then he flips through this notebook in this video. Now, the videos have been taken down. Otherwise, I'd show you from YouTube. But I could probably pull them up on X. People screen recorded them. But there was a page in the manifesto. He thumbed through it. There was a page where the church was stabbed with a knife. It was a church sanctuary, and it had a knife sticking out of it. So there were weapons. There was screenshots, videos of the weapons used in the massacre. The weapons had writings on them. They were marked with phrases like 6 million wasn't enough, meaning 6 million Jews wasn't enough. Kill Trump now. Israel must fall. And, as quickly as the videos went up, YouTube erased them, wiped it clean, buried the evidence. And I get, like, we have to protect the victims. If there were victim names in there, then yes, take them down. But this is evidence, and the people deserve to know why this happened. And the public needs to be made aware that this is part of a much larger deadly trend. So this is where we're going to start talking about the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. Because Westman is not the first transgender, and certainly probably won't be the last transgender identifying shooter to commit such a heinous act. Okay, in fact, this is becoming a disturbing pattern, and one the media would rather ignore. I was watching CNN coverage for about a couple of hours when it all unfolded. It happened right after my show. I popped on CNN just to see what was going on and what they were reporting on. Right after my show yesterday, 8:30, this all started to unfold. And they did not mention for hours. I mean, it became very, very clear that this individual is trans-identifying. And the media completely ignored it and did not touch that detail for hours. So I want you to think back to Audrey Hale. And I am going to pull up this graphic because I think that it will help you. Audrey Hale, 2023. This was in Nashville, Tennessee, where Audrey Hale walked into a Christian school, targeted her former classmates, and left 6 people dead, including 3 children. Okay, so there's this graphic here, and I'm going to pull it up. And people might give me all kinds of hate for this, but the truth is the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. This is a disturbing trend. These are all of the recent, like within the last decade, if that, since 2020, I would say more so. Some of these are 2019, 2018. Then the last 5 to 6 years, these are all the trans identifying shooters. Okay, so, and you might not think that this is a lot. This is just a handful of people. However, when you take into consideration that they make up less than 1% of the population, this is a disturbing trend. Okay, so think back to 2023, Audrey Hale. Hale identified as transgender. The manifesto still kind of remains hidden to this day. We have bits and parts of it, but still remains hidden. They hid this. They hid the motive. Clearly, the motive was anti-Christian and politically motivated. So that's Audrey Hale. And then I want to take you back to Denver of 2019. Devin Erickson, who identified as trans, opened fire at his STEM school. And his accomplice, Maya Alec McKinley, also identified as transgender. So that was in 2019. In 2018, Sonoko or Snokia Mosley. I don't know. This was in Maryland in 2018. 3 people at her work. She killed 3 people at her workplace before turning the gun on herself. Again, this individual is transgender. Iowa, we saw Dylan Butler. This guy, it wasn't transgender, but allegedly non-binary. Gender fluid is what he actually went by. This was the Iowa shooter. And in Philadelphia, we have Krim Brady Carricker, a man who presented as trans, gunned down innocent bystanders. Colorado Springs, Anderson Lee Aldrich, the shooter at the Club Q, claimed to be non-binary identifying. This was in Colorado Springs. That's the bottom image there. Bottom right-hand image you'll see on your screen. He was the shooter at Club Q, and the list goes on. I mean, I've got the Salvador Ramos. He was the Uvalde shooter. That is unconfirmed. There were pictures out there that looked like he was wearing a dress. I think it was some senators, congressmen had, said that he was transgender. That's been unconfirmed. Some of these are unconfirmed, a couple of them, and you'll see right there where it's written unconfirmed. Colt Gray, a shooter in Georgia, unconfirmed, identified as trans. Let's face it, the ones who are unconfirmed, it kind of looks like they might be transgender just by appearances. So, yeah, the list goes on. Yes, some are still disputed, but clearly I think we have enough here to establish a pattern, and this pattern is staring us in the face. Here's the chilling reality. Transgender people make up less than 1% of the population, yet in the last decade, and I'll be generous, because really this has just been in the last 5 years, the cases that I just shared with you. In the last decade, let's say, they account for a disproportionate share of high-profile mass shootings. That's not a coincidence. That's not chance. That is a symptom of a darker sickness. Okay, so we're told every day by the media and by our government that transgenderism is simply an identity, something to be celebrated, something to even be affirmed. But the hard numbers tell us a different story. Study after study shows us that transgender individuals are violent. Okay, so what do I mean by that? They attempt suicide at astronomical rates. Suicide is violence. Okay, so they attempt suicide at a rate of 45%. And you compare that to the 4 or 6% of the general population. Okay, so this is astronomically high, their suicide rate. Even when these folks receive the surgeries, because they'll say, the left, they'll say that, oh, well, they're attempting suicide because they're not being affirmed. We have more affirmation out there now for transgender folks than ever before, and the suicide rate still continues to be high, even among those individuals who receive the surgeries, receive the hormone treatments, live in affirming environments where their parents affirm their gender identity. The suicide risk for even those who receive the surgeries or receive so-called gender affirming care, the suicide risk remains astronomically high. So let's be clear. This is not about bullying. Okay, they're not being bullied. This is not just about a lack of acceptance out here. Okay, this is about a profound psychological disorder, distress, and this is about souls who are in torment. Okay, and instead of addressing that torment, and instead of offering healing, our society calls mutilation medicine, and they call the confusion health. And when broken, angry, confused people are told that their suffering is righteous and that Christians are their enemies and that America and Israel are evil, we shouldn't be surprised when they descend into violence and when they go after Christian schools or Christian children. We shouldn't be surprised. So this is not compassion, what we're doing with the transgender community. It's cruelty, and we're dressing it up as progress. So the pattern deepens. Christians are not only being ignored, and Christian values are not only being ignored by the government, Christians are becoming targets. Okay, so there is another pattern here. On top of transgender shooters becoming America's deadly trend, we have Christians who are becoming targets. So the Nashville Christian School was targeted. Minneapolis Church, Catholic Church, has now been targeted across America. We've seen it. Catholic churches are being burned. There was actually somebody who recently drove, I think it was a truck or a car into a church, and somebody gunned the individual down. Thank God somebody was there with a gun. Okay. And a good guy was there with a gun to stop the individual. But statues have been defaced. And the FBI, what did they do under the Biden administration? Well, they quietly drafted memos labeling, radical traditional Catholics as domestic terror threats. Okay, so that's what the FBI has been doing. They haven't been coming to the aid of Christians who are being targeted. No, they've been labeling Christians domestic terrorists. So it's not paranoia to say it anymore. It's not me being paranoid. It's not fake. Christian persecution is here. It's not just in Nigeria. It's not just in China. It's right here in America. And Jesus told us that this would happen. So this is the word. John 15. If the world hates you, keep in mind they hated me first. The blood of martyrs was the seed of the church. Okay, these children who died in these pews of this Catholic church in Minnesota, they're martyrs. They're Christian martyrs, and their blood cries out to heaven. And what's the media going to do? Ask yourself this. How will CNN cover this? I've already watched coverage of CNN. I think I have still yet to hear them talk about the shooter's identity and how he's trans-identifying. I still have yet to hear it. I was watching a little bit. I haven't watched it yet this morning. MSNBC, I tuned in there. They're going to be spending hours talking about assault weapons and gun violence. And the New York Times, they're going to run a feature on gun laws if they haven't done so already. Mark my words. And they're not going to say a lick about or whisper anything about the shooter transgender identity. And they will never talk about how the transgender community is targeting Christians and how Audrey Hale targeted Christians and she was trans-identifying, or how some of these individuals have anti-Israel messages sprawled across their weaponry. This guy had anti-Israel messages. 6 million wasn't enough, was sprawled across his weaponry. They're not going to talk about that. They deleted the YouTube videos, and they're going to pretend all of these details don't exist. Well, I won't, shield you from the facts here at the Conservative Cat Show, because, they're going to tell you the truth that fits with their narrative and fits with their story. But I'll tell you the truth that points to a very uncomfortable reality, that this ideology that has been celebrated and promoted not only by teachers in our school districts, but by the president, Joe Biden himself. Remember the trans individual who was there topless on the White House lawn? Okay, this has been promoted by our culture, and it is producing violent, broken, unstable souls. And this evidence is going to be buried just like they buried Audrey Hale's manifesto, and that's been locked away in Nashville. And every little inconvenient detail about the story is going to be swept under the rug, mark my words. So what do we do, in the face of darkness? What do we do from here? First, we have to tell the truth. We owe it to these Christian martyrs, to these babies, the 8-year-old, the 10-year-old who died. We owe it to them to not let the facts be erased by big tech, not let it be sanitized by the media. These manifestos must be studied, exposed, and understood. Second, we have to return to real healthcare. Transgenderism is not healthcare. Affirming transgenderism is not healthcare. Much like if your grandfather has dementia and says that the toaster is talking to him, you don't tell grandpa that the toaster is actually talking to him. You get grandpa the health care he actually needs. It's not living your truth. It's not living your authentic self, being transgender or non-binary. And it's really just an untreated mental illness, and we have to approach it as such with compassion, but we have to do it with honesty, because that's the most compassionate thing you can do, is tell a friend the truth. Most importantly, we've got to return to God. Without him, there is only despair, only confusion, only rage. I'm not even upset this morning. You might hear it in my tone of voice. Usually I get on here and I start screaming. I'm a little outraged. I'm not even upset. With him, there is healing, there is peace, and there is strength. I mean, I'm upset. I'm not mad, because we've got to return to God, because without him, we're only going to know despair and outrage. With him, there's going to be healing and peace and strength to endure even the darkest of days. And yesterday was a very dark day. So today we're mourning those children who are never going to be coming home from Mass. And today we mourn with the families who walked into that church and they expected to worship their Lord. They expected to meet the Lord and worship, but instead they met him in tragedy. We mourn for the nation, which is really, really confused and lost. They have confused the nation, mental illness for identity, and persecution for progress. This is not progress. The martyr, the attacks on Christians, this is not progress. This is Christian persecution. We have to speak out against it. And Christ himself told us, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Evil struck in Minnesota yesterday, but Christ has already won the victory. And for those of you who are grieving, we pray. For the church, we stand, and for America, we're going to speak the truth always here at the Conservative Cat Show. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, because here we're going to tell you the uncomfortable truth. And the uncomfortable truth is that this is becoming a deadly trend where transgender identifying individuals are shooting people up. All right. We have some more heavy lifting to do. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to get to some of your comments here. Anything trans is a mental disease. Apparently those kids killed and injured were literally praying to God. Tragic, but they're safely with God now. Yeah, they they went in there to meet him and worship, but they met him in tragedy. So I believe that Christian martyrs have special rewards in heaven, and these children are Christian martyrs. So they're definitely going to be rewarded in heaven. In the trainees' defense, the Democrats insist white Christian Americans are America's #1 domestic enemy threat ever. Yes. Well, they're very impressionable, right? And if you have online, constantly the media saying that Christians are the enemy, Christian nationalism is the #1 threat to America, you're going to have these unstable individuals. They're very impressionable. They're soaking that up like sponges, and they're going to act out what they're hearing in the media. So, yes, we are going to take a quick break. We're going to be talking a little bit about DCFS when we come back. I'll be right back. Conservative cat clips where the claws come out and the truth is on tap. I love the truth. I'm your host, Kat, and we are cutting through the holy hypocrisy and setting the record straight from the big lie that is pushed by the left. The Bible supports illegal immigration. Oh, really? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because guess what? We're walking through scripture and we're going to provide you some common sense. Now, every time we talk about the border security, some activist grabs the Bible and says, Jesus was a refugee. Okay, sweetie, let's clear this up. Jesus wasn't hopping the fence or dodging border patrol. Okay, his family fled legally under laws of the land. There's a big difference between seeking refuge and violating the country's sovereignty. The Bible is crystal clear about this. God is a God of law and order, and he's just so awesome. Man, I could just jump for Jesus every morning. Not chaos, not loopholes. God is not a God of that. God is a God of order, and everything has a place. Romans 13, 1-2 says, let every person be subject to governing authorities. Whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed. Okay, translation, the nation has immigration laws, okay, and they're not being followed. Smuggling people across the borders, overstaying your visa, and lying to get in, that's not compassion, that's rebellion, okay? And now, yes, the Bible says care for the stranger. Absolutely, but here's the kicker. In ancient Israel, the sojourner or foreigner was expected to obey the laws of the land. Here's Numbers. Numbers 15, verse 16 says, one law shall be for you and for your stranger who sojourns with you. There was one law, one standard. Not, oh, well, they meant well, let them break the rules. Nope, that's not it. There was one law shall be for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you. That's what Numbers 15, verse 16 says. And you are welcomed always, but you have to respect the system. You are welcomed when you respect the system. Okay, so let's talk about Nehemiah, the wall builder himself. He didn't pray away the invasion. He got up and he built the walls of Jerusalem to protect his people, not out of hate, but out of duty to his nation and to God. Tell that to an open borders bishop the next time they scream, build bridges, not walls. Build bridges, not walls. Okay, Nehemiah, he was a wall builder. The Bible also teaches us the importance of national identity, borders, and responsibility, and responsible governance. God divided the nations at Babel, and he assigned lands to tribes, and there was order. Not this open range global free-for-all, which is exactly what the left wants. So now the Bible doesn't bless law breaking just because someone has a sad story. Okay, it demands we show compassion within the boundaries of justice, just kind of like how Jesus and God are. God is a merciful God. God is also a God of justice. Illegal immigration is not mercy. It's disorder, it's deception, it's disrespect for the very nation God entrusted you to protect. Okay, so leftists, listen up. This has been Conservative Cat Club. I'm Cat. The Bible commands compassion, not chaos. Laws, not loopholes. Justice is demanded, not just your feelings. Okay, so let's stop twisting scripture to fit your socialist slogans. Build walls, build bridges, not walls. And let's start reading the truth and the true backbone of the scripture. And look at the several examples which show us that illegal immigration is not condoned in the Bible. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. Thanks so much. Hey, go ahead and smash that like button. Share this out with your friends. Yes, the kid had Phoenix Rise from the Ashes written on the mag. He also had Kill Donald Trump, Where is Your God? He also had all kinds of other things written on his weaponry, on his magazines. Truly tragic and blatant hate crime against Christians. He also said 6 million wasn't enough. So yes, definitely Nazi behavior here. The God of Israel is really who's under attack. People who worship the God of Israel. Now, remember, Christians and Jewish people, they worship the same God, Yahweh. And that is Hebrew for I am. And that's the God that we worship as Jewish people and Christian people. So this was a clear attack against Christians and against Jewish people and against those who follow and worship God of Israel. And, Christ himself told us that this world is going to have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So evil struck Minnesota, but Christ has already won the victory. And I do believe that these Christian children who died tragically, they are going to have so many rewards in heaven. They're Christian martyrs. And I believe that the Christian martyrs receive many rewards in heaven. So there's deeply disturbing trends going on. There's a rise in hate crimes, persecution against Christians. Jesus said that was going to happen in John chapter 15, that they hated me, so they're going to hate you. There's also this disturbing trend of transgender shooters. I shared this graphic with you. So they make up less than 1% of the population, yet over the last decade, I'll be kind here, the last decade, I'd say it's more so the last 6 years, there has been a rise in non-binary, gender fluid, and transgender people attacking people and being at the center of these high-profile mass shootings. Yet they make up less than 1%. And so this is a small group of people that I have here on your screen. And you might think it's small, but when you take into account that this community is less than 1% of the population and they're committing a lot of the high-profile mass shootings, this is a trend that we have to point out, and our approach to transgenderism has to change. We have to treat it like any other mental disease or defect. Anorexia, right? You wouldn't tell an anorexic person that, yes, you are fat. Okay, that she might truly believe that and see herself and think, yes, I am fat. But you wouldn't tell an anorexic person that she's fat. Okay, you shouldn't tell a transgender person that, yes, you are a boy if you're a girl, or yes, you are a girl if you're a boy. So, yeah, this is truly tragic. And what's even more tragic is the media is quietly sweeping these key details under the rug when we need these key details in order to change as a society and change our approach to how we deal with transgenderism. And really, we just need to treat it like it's the untreated mental illness that it is. We have to approach it with compassion, yes, but we also have to approach it with honesty. All right, so I want to shift gears. Let's talk about DCFS. Today, we're going to deal with a story out of Illinois that ought to send chills down your spine. Every parent's spine should be locked up and chilled. Imagine this. Close your eyes for me. Imagine there's a knock on the door. You open it, and standing at the door is somebody from the Department of Children and Family Services. This is the agency that has the power to take your kids away. You're nervous. You're praying that this is just a misunderstanding. But this so-called investigator winds up being an intern, not trained, not experienced, not licensed, just a college student kind of playing a government agent with your family on the line. And lately, DCFS has been talking about removing children. This kind of fits into the previous story, removing children who are not being affirmed at home or are not in affirming environments, which means that the parents don't affirm their identity. Okay, so this is not just carelessness, having interns masquerade essentially as investigators. It's dangerous. And according to one lawmaker, this is what DCFS is doing. They're having interns pose essentially or masquerade as investigators. So State Representative Jed Davis has blown the whistle. He says that DCFS is using uncertified interns to conduct family investigations. And at least in one case, the intern's findings led to a child being wrongly removed from a home. Okay, so Davis didn't mince words. His name is Jed Davis. He actually is quoted here in the Center Square. If you have somebody knocking at your door, you want to make sure that they had relevant experience to actually conduct a full investigation, because interns, by very definition, are lacking that experience. He's right, my friends. Would you want a med student fresh out of class, a med intern operating on your heart? No. Would you want a law intern to represent you in a murder trial? No. Then why in the world would we trust an untested, unlicensed intern to make life-altering decisions about our children? DCFS, of course, denies it. So allegedly, this is according to Jed Davis. Some information he's obtained that proves that DCFS is in fact doing this, where they have interns going out and masquerading as investigators. They say Davis has the law and the facts wrong. So that's what DCFS says. They say they called his involvement, Jed Davis's involvement here, with this issue, a grave understatement of inappropriateness. So they're saying he's being very inappropriate. In other words, Jed, sit down, shut up, let the bureaucrats do whatever they want, and there should be no accountability or transparency. But Jed Davis is not backing down by all appearances. He warned that if interns are knocking on doors, Illinois is opening itself to massive legal exposure. So again, he's right. You can't let amateurs make decisions that destroy families. You're not just inviting lawsuits, you're inviting tragedy. Okay, tragedy, having your children taken away. This is a very important job that we've entrusted DCFS with. Okay, and here's where it gets slippery. DCFS says that Davis doesn't understand the distinction between central management services classifications and statutory requirements. So in plain English, let me dissect the bureaucratic speak for you. This is bureaucratic word games they're playing here, okay? This is the oldest trick in the book. They're saying, well, technically, according to our paperwork, this person is authorized, okay? They have the certifications. But here's the truth. In state law, certification and licensing, they are not the same thing. Certification means you sat through the training, okay? Licensing means you're legally recognized to carry out these investigations. Okay, so they could do certifications, but they need that certification and the licensing via statute. That's what state law demands of them. And really what I think DCF is probably doing is they're blurring the lines between these words on purpose, like how the left always does. And the stakes couldn't be higher because this isn't just about misfiled forms, okay? This is about who has power to walk into your home and question your parenting and possibly take your kids from you and from your custody. That is the most sacred trust a state can hold, okay? And they're farming that trust out to interns, allegedly. So, friends, that is not child protection. That's government malpractice. That is what that's called, okay? And, the ACLU weighed in. I'm just dissecting this article that I stumbled upon, the Center Square. We would act decisively. They weighed in and they said, quote, we would act decisively under the BH decree if DCFS had a practice of sending out people who lack necessary training and credentials. So they would act decisively under the BH decree, and I'll get to what that means here in a second. But translation to what the ACLU said there, because again, I have to dissect how these people speak because they just aren't straight and to the point. We'll step in if there's systemic abuse, but for right now, we're not seeing any systemic abuse in the DCFS system. I'm going to debunk that here because I do think that there's systemic issues with DCFS. Now let's go back to Illinois DCFS. This is an agency that is supposed to protect kids. But time and time again, we see it fail. This agency fail in heartbreaking ways, and I'm going to argue that their failures are systemic. And ACLU should definitely take this seriously. The accusations that they are sending out interns rather than licensed investigators. Let's look at this case. A 5-year-old AJ Freund. He was beaten to death by his parents in Crystal Lake. The worst part, DCFS had been called to the home before. They had every warning sign, every chance to step in, and they didn't. And AJ's body was found buried in a shallow grave. There's another case, Samaj Crosby, 2-year-old from Joliet Township. She died after DCFS closed a neglect case against her family. Okay, just days later, after they closed it, the little girl was found under the couch in her own home. DCFS workers had literally been there, walked out the door, and left her in danger, okay? So they closed this case and they left her in danger. Look up these cases. These are real. These are not isolated tragedies. They show a pattern, decades in the making. And that's actually where the ACLU came in. So back in 1988, this group, ACLU, they filed a landmark lawsuit called BH versus Johnson. Out of that came a consent decree. Okay, consent decree that still governs DCFS to this day. The decree is supposed to fix things, make sure that the kids have safe, stable homes, reduce overload cases or case overloads, the overloaded caseloads, okay, protect funding, train caseworkers, overall supervision so that no child slipped through the cracks, okay, so that there's layers upon layers of supervisions in these cases. So that's what that decree is supposed to fix. And that decree came out of the BH versus Johnson case in 1988, and that was filed by the ACLU group. Okay, so ACLU says there's been progress, and I don't doubt that, but they do admit that they're still watching DCFS, and their spokesman, Ed Youngka, is quoted in the Center Square, says that workers need to be trained properly, and the monitoring will continue. That ACL is going to be on them, but here's the gut punch. The paperwork says progress, ACLU says progress, but then I see like AJ and Samaj, these kids are dead. They're still dead. Families are burying their babies because DCFS can do their damn jobs. 36 years after that consent decree, we're still talking about reforms, and the kids are still dying. Okay, so let's be honest. What does ACLU always say? They defend these government agencies up until the scandal gets to be so massive that they can't ignore it anymore. And, they throw out, ACLU is throwing out these reforms, since 1988, that consent decree. They talk about consent decrees, and then they talk about like progress, and, they're just kind of lip service, and meanwhile, you got these kids who are dying still. Dying in DCFS custody, caseworkers who are overwhelmed. And now these interns allegedly are being trusted with this life and death authority. Progress? I don't know. I don't know if there's been much progress, because I'd love for the ACLU and for these agencies to say, oh, there's progress being made. I'd love to see them tell that to the faces of the families who have been torn apart because of these sloppy investigations. Okay. So we need to pause. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of these families. Picture it. You're a single mom. You're working 2 jobs. You're exhausted. You're just trying to do your best. And someone makes an anonymous call, maybe an angry neighbor, maybe a spiteful ex, and DCFS investigator shows up. But, actually it's a 22-year-old something intern. And, they're going down this checklist. They check the boxes, and then they ultimately come to the conclusion that you are unstable, and then they take your kids away from you, and suddenly your child's in state custody. There's those cases. We need to make sure that kids that are in neglectful homes aren't staying in neglectful homes, and kids that aren't in neglectful homes stay with those parents who aren't neglectful. Or imagine being a Christian family, okay, who's homeschooling, and we already know that there's a suspicion cast on homeschoolers homeschooling, and the wrong note in an intern's file could result in this family being dragged through months of court hearings, their reputations ruined, the children are traumatized. So, friends, this isn't just paranoia. This isn't hyperbole. This is happening. Jed Davis is sounding the alarm, because actually he's a foster parent, and he's seen this firsthand, the issues with DCFS. So what does all this mean? It means we live in a state where bureaucracy values paperwork over people. Okay, on paper, everybody looks certified, like we didn't do anything wrong. But let's really value the people here. Okay, let's ensure that the licensing, let's make it even harder. Let's make it even more stringent process to get certified and licensed to be an investigator. where agencies claim good faith while hiding behind technicalities. I think that they are hiding behind a technicality. They're playing word games, bureaucratic word games, and they're saying, "Oh, we're operating in good faith," but yet you do this whole technicality, bureaucratic word game thing. Just come out and say it's a possibility. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it even harder to become a certified licensed DCFS investigator. It's going to be the top of the crop here, okay? The top crop. And we're going to make it even harder. You're right. We want to make sure that nobody who doesn't have this, like nobody with a lack of experience, is getting in front of people as an investigator with DCFS. And, I think we're at a point here where families are guilty. Say a family doesn't affirm a transgender individual or a transgender child or student, right? And the mom and dad are like, "No, Timmy, you're not Tammy, okay? You're little Timmy." They might be guilty until proven innocent, and that's what I think the approach is here at DCFS. You're guilty until proven innocent, and the children's are pawns in this little game. Okay, and this is why Illinois families are fleeing the state, by the way. I talk a lot on this show about taxes specifically and about crime, but the government has become really hostile towards parents. You can't raise your kids in peace anymore. And if a state starts to see your kids as their property and disrespects the family unit, and they start to see the kids as theirs and property to be managed and not as your children, that's when you're going to start you're going to start seeing parents flee the state. Biblically, parents are entrusted by God with the care of their children. Parents are entrusted by God with the care of their children, not by the state. Okay, they're heritage from the Lord. This is what Psalm 127 says. Children are the heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. Okay, yet Illinois and bureaucrats act like the children are wards of the state, and parents are merely renters of their families or renters of their children. And that's not liberty, that's tyranny. Okay, and remember, the left, and I say Democrats, but really it's just the establishment, the public sector, they are of the belief that they own your children. They have this belief that they own your children, and they're just anti-biblical. Okay, anything that is Christian, they just do the opposite. They're not very original people. Okay, they just do the opposite. So children are a heritage from the Lord, a fruit of the womb, a reward. So they're entrusted to the parents by God. And the state says, nope, we're going to do the opposite. Actually, the children are wards of the state. So where do we go from here? I like to do this. Smash this like button while you're here, by the way, and subscribe to the channel. Where do we go from here? I like to give you steps. First, we demand transparency. DCFS has to come clean about whether interns are actually conducting investigations. And if that's not happening, provide us the proof, the evidence that that's not happening. And no more word games, no more hiding behind classifications or certifications versus licensing, no more hiding behind these technicalities. And why don't you just come out and get ahead of it and say, actually, we're implementing more stringent licensing procedures and certification procedures. Second, we have to demand accountability. If a child was wrongly removed because of an intern's work at DCFS, there has to be consequences. There has to be real consequences, not just PR spin. Okay, there has to be consequences for that intern and for DCFS as a whole. Third, we have to fight for family rights because parents are not the enemy. Bureaucrats have to remember that. And as Christians, especially, we have to stand guard because the family is God's first institution. It's older than the church. It's older than government. Family is God's first institution. So Representative Jed Davis, good for him. He's sounding the alarm, but he can't stand alone, folks. Families have to rise up and say, hey, our children are not test subjects. Our homes are not classrooms for these interns to come in and play government agent. Our families are not yours to manage. And friends, Illinois has now become a cautionary tale. Right? We have to keep speaking the truth and keep defending our families. And we can't allow bureaucrats to believe that the state outranks God and the state outranks parents' authority. So I'm going to take a quick break. You're watching Conservative Cat. Smash that like button and share this out. Here is some of your comments. You guys can always send me super chats if you want to support the program. PatriotPumpEnergy.com. Buy your bottle of premium pre-workout today. It's on the shelf behind me. We've got fruit punch. There's caffeine. There's a little bit of black pepper extract that works. Black pepper extract that works with the caffeine to keep you focused all day long. We don't pump you full of sugars, artificial colors, or caffeine. There's 150 milligrams. In comparison, energy drinks are like 300 milligrams. It's insanity. We're not trying to get you addicted. We're just trying to provide you long-lasting energy. Use promo code ConservativeCat at checkout. Here's some of your comments. They brainwash the kids into dysphoria. It'll keep happening. These are very twisted people. Yeah. They brainwash them. They brainwash them into gender dysphoria. And really, people don't like to talk about this, but I will. Homosexuality, transgenderism, non-binary. Actually, a lot of these kids who report this gender dysphoria also report sexual abuse or sexual grooming. And I think a lot of it stems from that. So we have completely dismissed what grooming actually is and what it looks like. Grooming is when an adult talks to children about sex in a context that they should not be talking about sex to children, okay, and making children uncomfortable in a situation where they are talking about sex in some form, okay. And a lot of our public school teachers are doing that, and we've dismissed it, and we've said, oh, that's not grooming, it's sexual education, okay, or it's sex ed. And really what's going on here is that these kids are being abused, and they are sexually confused, and then they are fleeing towards dysphoria. So I'm going to take a quick break, smash that like button, and I'll get to some of your comments a little bit later on the other side. You're listening to Conservative Cat.
Sometimes God stops you cold, not with a whisper, with a punch to the soul. Saul wasn't looking for Jesus. He was hunting Christians. He had power, position, and a mission. Then God knocked him to the dirt, a light from heaven, a voice that knew his name. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? That moment wasn't soft. It wasn't sweet. It was a spiritual ambush. God still works like that. He steps into your mess, interrupts your pride, confronts the man you've become when you're wandered too far. Maybe you're building your own kingdom. Maybe your fists are up, fighting battles God never called you to. Or maybe you're just running hard in the wrong direction. But then comes the voice, clear, heavy, holy. Why are you persecuting me? Jesus doesn't want your behavior fixed. He wants your heart surrendered. Saul didn't get a lecture. He got a mission. Get up, go to the city. You'll be told what to do. That's the way of real manhood in the kingdom. Surrender first, then orders. You don't need every answer right now. You need to obey the voice. Follow the light. Rise up off the dirt and walk the road God lays out for you. Some roads break you to rebuild you, and that's exactly what Jesus wants. You want to train like a warrior? You need fuel like one. Patriot Pump is clean, powerful pre-workout that won't let you quit halfway. Just like the mission God gives you, it's not about the hype. It's about the grit. Fuel up, lock in, get after it.
Hey, go ahead and smash that like button, share this out with your friends. So, yeah, but it seems like he was obsessed with serial killers, mass killers, and just really sadistic stuff in general. At least their letter didn't seem to relate to the trans thing or relate the trans thing to the shooting. So I'm going to push back a little bit there, Joshy. Joshy, thank you for being here today. I'm going to push back a little bit. Yes, 100%. I believe it has everything to do with the trans thing. Why? Because in Genesis, it talks about how God created man and woman. They're separate, okay? Christians have been put in the hot seat as domestic terrorists simply for holding the belief that there is no such thing as transgenderism and that God doesn't make mistakes, okay? He, in this letter, has a knife sticking out of a church, out of a sanctuary, okay? So also in the letter, and I'll pull it up here, it's a 20-minute video. I found it on Twitter. There's stickers of LGBTQ stickers. It's a 20-minute video, and I'm not going to play the whole thing. But, we can kind of fast forward. There's some LGBTQ stickers in this book. One is like equality is the trans flag is in there with the gun, and I know that transgenderism is like the antithesis to what Christianity is all about. So this was clearly targeted. Like, I think that we can all agree that this was targeted, that the Christian school was targeted. On his gun, he said, "Where is your God?" Okay. So the trans thing is simply just anti-Christian. Okay. Christians would tell you the truth and tell you that God created man and woman and that he doesn't make mistakes. Okay. And the trans community doesn't like that. Democrats, mainstream media, they don't like that. They've actually labeled Christians, Catholics, traditional Catholics as radicals. The FBI, they did this quietly via memos, and they've said that, they're domestic terrorists and that's hate speech. Like, how dare you not affirm transgenderism or transgender somebody's transgender identity? That's bigoted, right? So I think it has everything to do with the transgender thing, because he hates Christians for not, I would imagine that this individual hates Christians for not affirming his identity. Although not explicit in the letter, I mean, the very nature of the attack itself is, against Christians, and Christians hold the belief that there is no such thing as men being able to be women and women being able to be men. They are the most outspoken group of people against transgenderism. So he targeted a specific group of people. All right. Let's get to Vicky. I think it is counselors as well that are insisting we affirm these kids in their insanity. Yes. So I've talked about this before on the program, where therapy is just secular, and it is against what the Bible tells us to do as far as counseling. We are to go to the counselor or have many counselors within the church. And what therapy teaches is the direct opposite of what the Bible teaches. Therapy, these counselors, they will teach things like self-identity and confidence. And, there's nothing wrong with confidence, but they teach children to not deny themselves, to not be humble. And that is the direct opposite of what the Bible teaches about, what we should be like, to deny ourselves, that we are inherently evil and that we aren't all good. Okay. And therapists will tell you, oh, you're a good person no matter what, and it's all about the feel good, because they want you to keep coming back, right? Because they want the cash. Okay. And therapy is just anti-biblical and it's anti-Christian. So I've said that multiple times, where the practice itself is never going to get kids out of their mental health disorders, because they teach that your mental health disorder is something that you can't control, and it's a part of you, and it's something to be celebrated and promoted. I mean, I know kids that throw in their Twitter bios or their social media bios that, oh, I'm autistic, or, oh, I have ADHD, or, oh, I have PTSD, and they almost like wear it like it's a fur coat. And the therapist will tell you that you are that disease and that is your identity, and it's nothing you should be ashamed of. We're taught in the Bible that, yes, we have shame through Christ. We don't have to feel that shame because we are forgiven, but we are to deny ourselves and we are to be humble. And that is not what therapists teach. Okay, so yeah, the counselors have a good therapist, mainstream medical psychology. They have a big part in enabling mental issues and disorders. They enable it rather than say, hey, no, you are not your mental disease. I truly am of the belief that mental diseases like depression, suicidal thoughts, bipolar, schizophrenia, these are demons, and that they can be taken away through invoking the name of Jesus Christ. And, it's tough, but you have to realize that you are not that thing. Okay. And the therapist will tell you, you are schizophrenic, you are depressed, and here's some medication, and you're just going to have to stay on it the rest of your life because you are this person. You are your depression. And the Bible teaches that you are not those things, and that Jesus takes all those things away, and the Holy Spirit gives you self-control, gives you the ability to deny yourself, and gives you patience, takes away anxiety, that Jesus is the Prince of Peace. And these therapists will not invoke the name of Jesus Christ, okay? Do you really think that they're going to lay hands on a student and say, in the name of Jesus, I command depression to come out of you? They're never going to do that, okay? Because that stuff would actually work. And they, of course, need the kids to come back. Otherwise, they're out of a job. All right, I want to shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about this. Before I took the break, I was telling you a little bit about the Department of Children and Family Services in Illinois. This is an agency that is supposed to protect the most vulnerable among us. Instead, time and time again, it's been failing our children. And, this agency has been failing our children, and there are deadly consequences here. And the ACLU says, yes, there's been progress since that 1988 decree, the consent decree. With this court case in 1988, they had launched a landmark lawsuit. But I want to point this out. Some of these cases, 8-year-old Navin Jones, okay, DCFS knew he was in danger. They had been to his house. They saw the warning signs, and still they left him there. And a month later, he was dead with severe malnutrition. Okay, now his parents are facing murder charges. But where's the state when where was the state when this little boy needed rescuing? Okay, this 15-year-old Dominic Whitfield, a foster child with type 1 diabetes. Okay, she didn't die from bad luck. She died because the adults in charge, DCFS, and their contractor, UCAN, so UCAN, they didn't make sure that she had her insulin. Okay, and imagine that, a child under state care dying from something totally preventable. Okay, insulin. That's not just negligence, it's abandonment. And here's the kicker. DCFS has been reporting these cases, hasn't been reporting these cases properly. Since 2018, more than 1,200 child deaths and over 3,000 injuries under their watch went underreported or undocumented. Okay, so they don't even really report these the way they should. And friends, if you're a parent and you ignored your children the way DCFS ignores children in their care, you would have that kid taken away from you. But when DCFS does it, bureaucrats, they shrug and they just keep on cashing the taxpayer checks. Jesus said this, quote, "Let the little one come unto me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Our state agencies should tremble at that verse, should tremble at Jesus Christ's words, because one day they'll have to answer for the way they treated the least of these. Illinois politicians, they throw millions at these bureaucrats who can't keep our children safe. But When parents ask for things like school choice or real freedom to raise their kids in safe and nurturing environments, such as homeschooling, they're told no. They're told you're crazy. They're deemed domestic terror threats. If they speak out at school boards and say, hey, stop sexualizing the children, stop putting pornography on the bookshelves, you're labeled a domestic terrorist. And that tells you all you really need to know about the priorities of Springfield. They can't keep the kids safe. They get mad at you for trying to keep the kids safe. That tells you all you need to know about the priorities of Springfield. So I want to shift gears. We're going to talk about election integrity now. Smash that like button. Share this out with your friends. Hit the like button while you're here. That really helps me out, folks. And subscribe. The biggest thing you can do is subscribe to the channel to support the channel. We want to do so much more. TheConservativeCat.com, TheConservativeCatShow.com. What we want to do there is provide you blog posts. So everything I talk about on the show, I want to be able to provide you a blog post to look back at and to share those articles with your friends. If you like something specific about the show, I want you to have a reference. So the numbers that I use, earlier in the show, I talked about how the suicide rate, I have all my references, right here with me, but I want to provide you those in a website blog format. And in order to do that, we need your support. So send a super thanks, a super sticker, a super chat, or visit Patriot Pump Energy and buy your bottle of pre-workout. For $10 off, you can use the promo code ConservativeCat. Okay, so let's talk about election integrity. Good morning, my patriots. Today we're talking about something Americans should care about, which is election integrity. So Illinois voter rolls, they are under federal scrutiny, essentially. So the Department of Justice, they are demanding full access to the registration data. So registration data, that would be names, addresses, date of birth, driver's licenses, partial social security numbers, okay? And, some election authorities are real in a hubbub about this. They're like, privacy concerns and yada, yada, yada. Really what the DOJ is trying to do, their goal here is to ensure elections are accurate and lawful. They're trying to restore trust in the system with oversight. Okay. And here's the kicker. McLean County officials, you've got Clerk Kathy Michael and Bloomington Election Commission head Luke Stremlow. Okay, they are just kind of brushing this off from what I gathered in this article that I stumbled upon. It's a WGLT article. I stumbled upon it on my news feed this morning. And in this article, they are openly promoting mail-in voting, and they are treating it like it's a flawless system. Okay. And folks, it is anything but flawless. I will provide you, I will provide you an example where it failed. Okay. These mail-in ballot fails sometimes. Okay. So I'll provide you an example here in just a second. But folks, this is anything but flawless. And we're talking about a method that is mail-in ballots are just super vulnerable to fraud, error, and manipulation. Okay. Local officials, people will want you to trust this blindly, and I am telling you, do not trust this blindly. So according to NPR affiliate WGLT, McLean County mails out thousands of ballots every election. In 2024, they sent out 7,550 mail-in ballots, okay, and 6,614 were returned. Officials boast that 60 to 80% of their voters use this system. We should be transitioning off of the system, if not outright eliminating it. Okay, this is just so wrong. We didn't use it prior to 2020. What's so bad about going back to the way we used to vote prior to 2020? There's nothing wrong with it. Just in-person voting. And to be frank with you, not everybody should vote. If you don't prioritize it and make it a priority, and it's last minute and you don't get out to the polls, well, SOL, right? Like, I don't know what to say. You have the right to vote and you have the right not to vote. And we've shifted here in Illinois to this idea of almost compulsory voting, which is actually something real that they've been talking about. Australia does this, where they force you to vote. And if you don't vote, they actually issue a fine. No, look this up. Compulsory voting has actually been talked about here at a state level. There was a measure that seeks to have Illinois join Australian compulsory voting practices. This was House Bill 2718, and it became law. Okay, so this is a bill where you don't get fined if you don't vote compulsory voting is if you don't vote, you get fined. Typically, that's how they do it in Australia. Now, House Bill 2718 didn't do that exactly. But because they passed this, I'm sure in a couple of years they're going to say, oh, well, now you owe $50 if you don't vote, or we're going to find you $100 if you don't vote. And it provides an eligible citizen who casts a blank ballot, that an eligible who casts a blank ballot. That's crazy, sending back and forth blank ballots, okay, via the mail. People have the right to exercise their right to vote, and if they don't want to vote, they don't have to register to vote. They don't have to vote, okay? House Bill 2718, it says that more than 24 countries, most notably Australia, treat voting as a civic duty rather than similar to jury duty. Okay, so this is like implementing almost like compulsory voting, which is really creepy. And the reason why I bring that up is because we're getting to a point where our officials want to do compulsory voting. They don't want you to not participate. And you have the right to not vote, and you have the right to vote, okay? Otherwise, that's like Mussolini, like dictatorship that we're living in if you force me to go vote, okay? They do that in CCP China, okay? For Xi Jinping, they force their constituency to go out and vote for the dictator, okay? So here's the problem. The mail-in voting relies on trust, not verification. Okay, Kathy Michael, and the BEC guy, Streamlow, they admit that if a voter doesn't return a card, they assume that voter is inactive, or they will mail another ballot. Okay, they can't assume that the voter is inactive or just mail another ballot. So multiple ballots going to potentially the wrong person or potentially no one at all, lost ballots, fraudulent signatures. These are not hypotheticals. These are inherent risks in the system. Okay, you can't deny that mail-in ballot system comes with inherent risks. And Kathy Michael told WGLT that eliminating mail-in voting would take away voters' rights. Now, I don't know about you, but like in 2019, prior to universal mail-in ballots, like we all had our rights still, right? Like maybe I'm crazy for saying that, but like in 2018, I'm pretty sure everybody still had their voters' rights. So she claimed that disabled voters, military overseas, possibly being impacted by eliminating mail-in ballots, which is not true. The Trump administration is not getting rid of military absentee ballots. Those have been a thing for a very long time. That is not what the Trump administration wants to do. He wants to get rid of universal mail-in ballots. Okay, so you and I getting mail-in ballots. It used to just be for military people overseas. Yeah, I get it. Accessibility matters, but like, does that mean we compromise election integrity for convenience and for accessibility? Like I said, it's pretty much accessible. Like they're not talking about getting rid of early voting. So you have like 40 days prior to the election to go out and early vote. So in person. And like, what's wrong with you? Like, make it a national holiday. I've got no problem with making Election Day a national holiday and giving everybody the day off to go vote. I've got no problem with that. But like, you can't make it much easier. Okay. And mail-in ballot voting is just increasing accessibility at the expense of integrity. And we don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I know you don't want to do that. So McLean County treats mail-in voting, clearly by this interview, they're treating it like it's the gold standard. Like we have to have mail-in voting. I am old enough to remember that we didn't have that back in 2019. I was voting prior to mail-in ballots being a thing. And I don't know about you, but I think everybody still had their voting rights in 2019. So they assume, here's the problem, they assume that the chain of custody works perfectly, and it doesn't. And I'm going to get to a couple of examples here, but that's optimism that, you send out. And let me ask you this. Would you mail yourself $100 in the U.S. postal system right now? Would you get a $100 bill, put it in an envelope, drive it to your nearest post office and mail it out and mail it to yourself? You probably wouldn't do that because you'd be somewhat afraid that it wouldn't get there. Okay. So it's complete optimism to sit there, and it's not realism to sit there and say that, oh, the chain of custody with the mail-in ballots works out just great. Okay. It doesn't. And this is where the DOJ is stepping in. They're saying, hey, we're going to check your work. We're going to check your voter registration, your voter rolls. And really what should be going on is that these officials should be welcoming it with open arms. Like, yes, finally, we have some oversight. We have some officials who are being cautious. The DOJ is being cautious. And I don't know about you, but it seems like people in Illinois, they're getting a little defensive about the voter rolls being shared with the DOJ. And that should make you pause. It should make you pause that you have election officials who are so pro mail-in voting that they will go to the extent to say that it is against voters' rights to get rid of it. This is craziness. Mail-in voting creates multiple opportunities for abuse. Ballots can be sent to wrong addresses or deceased voters. Fraudulent signatures can slip through, and there's no guarantee that each ballot is authentic. Okay, so McLean County, they have a high rate of mail-in ballots. 80% means the bulk of their votes are processed without an in-person verification. That should freak you out. When I say that McLean County, a majority of the votes that are coming in are mail-in ballots, 80%, that means no eyeballs, physical eyeballs, are verifying these ballots in person. So NPR WGLT confirms that there's been 0 documented cases of fraud in McLean County. Okay, but absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Okay, oversight is exactly what the DOJ is providing here by saying, hey, we want your voter rolls. We want to be able to comb through this data. I do want to share this with you. This is an article. And it's got a couple of examples here that I want to share. Here we go. Sorry, I'm pulling it up. It's an article, and there's a couple of ballot flubs here, mail-in ballot flubs particularly, that have happened, okay? This happened in 2024. Okay, I'm going to look at one that was in Cook County, and then I'm going to look at one that was specifically in McLean County, okay? So this kind of stuff happens all of the time. And when people say like, oh, mail-in ballots, mail-in voting, it's like so crucial and so it's so awesome, and there's no problems with it whatsoever. I point them to these 2 examples, and there's so many other examples I could point to, but I'll just do 2 for today for timing. Voters are expressing distrust in the election process, specifically when it comes to vote by mail ballots. There's a mistake. Mistake. Huh. Well, that's odd. I thought mail-in ballots, and I thought the system was flawless, beautiful. Turns out that there are mistakes. So in Cook County, this actually resulted, there were mail-in ballots that went out where there was a libertarian candidate and there was no bubble. Okay. And that's important because when you tabulate, you need the bubble. Okay. And it was printed next to the candidate's name, but not printed on the vote by mail ballots. Which is to be printed right next to the candidate's name, but it wasn't printed on the mail-in ballots that went out. Okay, so the candidate's name showed up, but there was no bubble to actually select that candidate, and it went out via the mail-in ballots. Okay, so the Libertarian Party of Chicago chairman, Jim Hummey, he said that voters reached out to him and informed him that there was no fill-in bubble. Okay, it was completely missing. Okay, for the clerk of circuit court candidate, Michael Murphy. Without the bubble, the scanner's not going to recognize the vote for our candidate. And the clerk's office looked into the matter. They said it was a printing error. So they admitted that this was an error. So mail-in ballots, like I said, there's strife. There are multiple opportunities for error and abuse. This is another example. This is an error. Okay, so here's an example of an error. Why we should get rid of them. Okay. Because there's no in-person verification. If this were to have happened in person, somebody got a ballot, and I get it, printing errors happen. But when there's no in-person verification or in-person, like, hey, I'm voting right now in real time. There's no bubble here on my ballot. They can catch that. Most likely a voter is going to bring it to their attention pretty early on, and they can catch that sooner, okay, rather than later. You're going to get all kinds of mail-in ballots back, and they did, where voters voted, but they didn't even have the option to vote for the Libertarian candidate in this race. because there was no bubble. Okay. And there should be a quality control process in place. There needs to be reform. This is why, they're running a candidate. The Libertarian Party was running a candidate against the incumbent clerk. Otherwise, you're disenfranchising the voters by not having a really quality control process. So the Cook County spokesperson, Sally Daly, said that the mistake was less than 300 ballots. Oh, it wasn't even that bad. And that's what they say about the mail-in ballots. They say, oh, it's not that bad. Out of the over 167,000 mail-in ballots that went out. Yeah, it is a big deal. You have 300 ballots. I promise you, if this had been an in-person voting thing and there was a printing error that happened in person, it probably would have taken one person. The first person to vote might have recognized this, brought it to the person in charge, or an election judge in charge, and then it would have stopped right there. But because you had 300 ballots go out, then they went back in. It was confined to a single precinct. That's what they say. And the corrected mail-in ballots were distributed later to those voters. Well, are they going to vote again? Maybe they filled out the wrong ballot. They were disenfranchised from having all of the choices. They sent in their mail-in ballot thinking that they voted. Now these corrected mail-in ballots went back out. Are they going to get it in the mail? Are they going to re-vote? There's all kinds of problems with mail-in voting. Another problem, another mistake, error. People will say that there's no problems with mail-in voting. We should keep it. BS. Okay, so McLean County, a mistake has led voters to question whether their vote by mail ballots will be counted this election. So a third-party company, Modern Litho, was hired to mail out and track mail-in ballots for McLean County. The company sent out 180 vote-by-mail ballots with an envelope where the return address was wrong. Okay, it was to Monroe County Clerk's Office. Okay, so these are McLean County ballots that are to be returned to McLean County, but they were being sent to Monroe County. They had the wrong return address printed. Several voters notified the McLean County GOP chair of the mistake. So Dennis Grunler, he started getting texts saying something's wrong. Our ballots have been returned or have the wrong return address on them. Do our votes count if it goes to Monroe County? Right? So Kathy Michael explained that the third-party company, it's the third-party company, they hired that sent out the wrong envelope, right? I get it. Like, one ballot was sent back to Monroe County, and then they were notified immediately. And if any more ballots go out to Monroe County, they cannot be processed or counted. So then they're going to have to send the mail-in ballots again. Okay. And again, you run into that problem. Are the voters actually going to continue to vote or vote again and re-vote the right way and send their ballot to the right location? There's just all kinds of errors, and abnormalities with this. And, your mind just starts to wander when you see these kinds of mistakes and these abnormalities. And Modern Litho, who sent out the mail-in ballots, by the way, on behalf of McLean County, they said that it was due to human error. Okay. So, yes, error happens with mail-in ballots. And I feel like these errors wouldn't happen as much if we just had in-person ballots or in-person voting. Okay. Errors are going to happen. I get that. But that was just a couple of mistakes that I've stumbled upon over the years. Just a couple of them. So the DOJ isn't playing politics here. They are demanding a full kind of like audit of their voter rolls here in the state of Illinois to ensure compliance with federal law and maintain accurate, up-to-date voter lists. McLean County officials might act like the DOJ is meddling. And let's be honest, if your system is airtight, number one, McLean County wouldn't have had an issue like that if it was airtight. But let's be honest, if your system is as airtight as you say, you should welcome the verification. Supporting mail-in ballots without independent oversight. We definitely need oversight if we're going to continue this mail-in ballot thing. That's just asking for trouble if you're not having independent oversight, or the federal government or all of our government agencies checking each other. The State Board of Elections should be checking the election or the local election authorities and their voter rolls and making sure that they're up to up to date and making sure that they're accurate and in compliance with federal law, meaning no illegal immigrants are registered to vote. The DOJ is just a check on the local officials. And, they should welcome that. And scripture tells us, actually, to test everything and hold fast to what is good. An election, that means testing local authorities and demanding transparency. McLean County's enthusiasm for mail-in voting is admirable if your goal is convenience and accessibility, but it's dangerous if your goal is secure elections. And I think that they just have different goals. They want everybody to be able to vote, and almost to a point where it's compulsory, where they want nobody to not vote. Okay. And, oversight, audits, federal involvement, protect your liberty and your vote, blind trust in local offices, especially those who promote risky systems and say that the risky systems shouldn't be eliminated. That is a problem. Like, we should not blindly trust our local officials, especially if they are promoting mail-in ballots, which is, I've proven in this podcast, is a risky system. I don't trust anybody who says, oh, mail-in ballots are like a great system and you should keep it. What? We had it prior to 2020. I think we'll be fine. If we go back and we eliminate mail-in voting altogether. So here's the reality. McLean County, they love mail-in voting, and they want you to trust it implicitly. But every ballot sent through the mail is a risk to the integrity of your vote. Okay? The DOJ is not the enemy here. They are safeguarding our election system, an election system that desperately needs safeguarding. They are trying to be vigilant. They are trying to be transparent. And skepticism should be welcomed. Okay? So I'm going to take a quick break. Let me get to some of your comments here. Yes, today we've been talking about the Minnesota church massacre, and I've been specifically talking about the transgender shooter and how this has become a disturbing trend, deadly trend here in America, where trans-identifying individuals are at the center of high-profile mass shootings. The shooter was chronically online, mentally ill, satanic. The trans shooter theories are played out at this point. It's deeper than just that. So trans, this is a part of a satanic cult, like that you can be. There's actually a pagan deity. And I forget the name. I think it's a female pagan deity that says that you can be a man or be a woman, and it's actually satanic, and that's what it is. It's anti-Christian. So the very act of shooting up Christians in the school tells me that the intention here, or the motive, definitely had something to do with his trans identity. Here we go. Women shouldn't vote. If you don't own a house, you shouldn't vote. There should also be an IQ test. Yeah. Hey, I love it. I know that's going to sound crazy coming from me, a woman. It used to be where men would vote, and really what would happen would be the men in the household would consult the families, and the family would send the man as a representative for the household to go vote. And I am of the same belief. I also don't believe that women should vote. I know that sounds crazy, and people are like, Kat, how could you? No. The feminization of, and really, it's not just me. It's not a crazy, so the women back in the time period, there were women who were fighting against this. They said, no, we're not going to have as much of a say. It's going to cause a divide in households, and families are going to be torn apart. How many families do you know where families have been completely torn apart due to politics? And really, the leader of the household, the man, and this is biblical, and Christ, the husband, and the wife oversees the children in a nurturing way. The leader of the household is the man, right? And when and Kamala Harris even had like a campaign video about getting out to vote, and she says, what your husband doesn't know how you're voting, so you can vote any way you want. Like there's a clip out there, and I'd have to show you. But you guys remember it. It was a campaign video. That is causing all kinds of animosity amongst the family unit. Okay, the family unit should be just that. They should be unified in religion, in politics. And who unifies? It is the leader of that unit. They are tasked with the unification of that family. And it only makes sense that the leader goes out and speaks for the family. The family should be unified. The man and wife should be unified in their response and in their vote. And I know that might be dated, but animosity in a household is not good. It leads to broken families. And when you have a husband and wife who are politically at disagreement or in disagreement, you are going to break up a family. Like, there is no way that you are going to be able to raise a family and a successful family at that. There's going to be animosity in the household, and giving women that right to vote just made it ripe for animosity to be introduced into the household, and it broke up families. And that's what women were really nervous about, where, hey, you know, that's going to open the door for me and my husband to fight and to have disagreements about who we're going to vote for. And I'm sure that there were disagreements, you know, prior to women having the right to vote. And I'm sure that those disagreements, what happened was you sit down, you talk about it, and you say, hey, you know, honey, I really want you to vote this way, prior to women being able to vote, and you come to an agreement. And then in that process, you are unified as a family, and that man goes out and votes for your household. So yeah, you're 100% right on. It should be selective. We should be selective in who gets to vote. Because right now it's anybody, and in compulsory voting countries, what you wind up seeing is, in order for people to avoid fines, because like in countries like Australia, they will actually fine you if you don't go vote. I don't know about you, but that sounds kind of like a dictatorship, totalitarian. But they will actually fine you if you don't go vote. And what winds up happening is you have, say, Tom, who has no interest in voting or doesn't have the time. What he will go do is pay somebody to go vote so he can avoid the fine. So, hey, I'll pay you $20 so I can avoid a $100 fine if you go vote for me. Okay, and that is, of course, not right. And you know, Illinois is seriously looking at compulsory voting. They've drafted up bills about it. Okay, so that they want to look at voting as if it is a civic duty, similar to that of jury duty, where you have to go do it or there's some sort of consequence. Oh no, the normies have figured out that pumping kids full of hormones makes them crazy. Yeah. That is a whole nother topic with the shooter being trans. And I shared this graphic with you all morning, that it's becoming a disturbing trend, that you've got Devin Erickson and Maya Alec McKinley. These were both trans identifying, and they were the Denver school shooters. This was in Maryland. The Nokia Mosley, he identified as trans. No, I don't know. Audrey Hale, because it gets really hard to tell, like, especially with these pictures. Audrey Hale, we know, Nashville school shooter, a couple of others. Some of these are unconfirmed. You'll see there where I noted unconfirmed. But this is a graphic, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think about 10 people who identify as non-binary transgender. They make up less than 1% of the population. So this is a deadly trend. And you're so right. The hormones, testosterone, it's really crazy. Like, how can I compare it? Teenage boys. Okay. So teenage boys, I grew up with one, and, you know, holes in the wall, throwing things, with that testosterone. And specifically, you'll see in a couple of these, Audrey Hale specifically, I think she was female to male. Some of these, testosterone is really to blame here, the hormone, because it's a crazy hormone. And once you pump it full, I mean, teen boys, they act out violently. They will put holes in the wall. If you've ever had teen boys, you know this, that they act out violently. They have fits of rage. Even estrogen, right? Another example would be pregnant women. Okay, at some point in the pregnancy, the estrogen goes through the roof and they start to act a little bit crazy, a little bit emotional. Okay. And this is just common knowledge. Like, not in nature, we can see how hormones affect the body. And when you artificially pump people full of those hormones, there is not a whole lot of studies in what happens to people who do that, but we can kind of infer what happens, long-term studies, I should say. We should be able to infer that, hey, pumping people full of hormones artificially and at like a single moment and not over the course of time. So puberty is often where kids start to act out and start to be a little crazy. That's because there's a spike. Okay. Now, what they're doing to trans kids is that they are artificially spiking their hormones. And we have no long-term studies on the effects of that. Okay. Now, we can infer what spikes do and what actions are resulted out of the spikes of hormones because of our daily lives. Okay. We see it in teens. We see it in pregnant women. You can see it in men, specifically older men. So that's why there's all kinds of testosterone supplements out there for older men to take because they start to get angry when their testosterone starts to dip. There's a tiredness. You'll see it a lot with Alzheimer's patients or dementia patients where their testosterone, actually dementia is linked to testosterone dips. And you start to lose your mind, like quite literally start to lose your mind when your testosterone dips as you become, and the ornery old men, like that's a trope out there. It's a stereotype, but there's actually a reason for it. It's because your testosterone starts to dip a little bit with age. And it has a 100% effect on your mood. Let's see. I'm going to get to some of your comments on the other side. I'm going to take a quick break, though, get a sip of water, and then we're going to come back because there's something that you need to know about the California Democrats. They are steamrolling ahead on their plans to enact these redistricting maps. They passed a package of bills. It was pushed for and signed by Governor Gavin Newsom this month. And they said that, we're doing this for the people. It's not for the people. It's for Governor Gavin Newsom and Democrats. But we're going to get to that here just a little bit. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Welcome to Conservative Cat Clips, where we deal with the truth, not talking points. I'm your host, Kat, and today we're putting a spotlight on something the abortion industry wants to keep you in the dark about: abortion pills. What are they? How do they work? And how are they hurting women? Let's talk about the facts. Over 54% of abortions in America are now done using chemical abortion pills. That number is climbing fast. Why? Because it's easier, it's cheaper, and it's quieter. But here's what they won't tell you. Abortion pills come with a serious risk. The process is two drugs: mifepristone, which actually ends the pregnancy, and misoprostol, which forces the body to expel the baby. Sounds simple, right? It's not. According to the FDA, 4,200 serious adverse events have been reported, including 28 deaths since 2000, the year 2000. And those are just the official numbers. In 2021, there was a peer-reviewed study that found that ER visits after chemical abortions increased by over 500% between 2002 and 2015. And here's the kicker. Many of these cases are coded as miscarriages, and they're coded as miscarriages because women don't, or they can't tell the hospital what actually happened and that they actually took these pills. That means the real damage, probably much worse. So way more than 4,200 adverse events since 2000. Now brace yourself. The Biden administration made it to where these pills were accessible by the mail with no person exam, no ultrasound, and no guarantee that the pregnancy had to be an ectopic pregnancy. So, I mean, you could be taking these in your 6 months, 7 months, 8 months along. And it's not, this could be deadly if you take it when it's not an ectopic pregnancy. Women are being told to take these powerful drugs and there's zero medical supervision. That's not healthcare. It's called negligence. It's medical negligence. And we're seeing heartbreaking stories about all these women who are bleeding alone in dorm rooms, bathrooms, parking lots, or even in their own cars in the parking lot. Clinics like Planned Parenthood calls this empowerment and empowering, but tell me how it's empowering to hand a teenager a handful of pills and say, good luck. The emotional fallout is just as real, by the way. There's a physical risk, but there's an emotional risk as well. Women reported feeling abandoned, traumatized, and even haunted by what they've done, especially when they see the tiny, tiny body of their baby passing and passing that. It's traumatizing, and nobody tells them that they're going to see the tiny baby in the pamphlet. So here's the truth, the plain and simple truth. Abortion pills are not safe. They're not kind, and they're not empowering. They actually hurt women, and they silence their pain by taking these chemical abortion pills, and they protect an industry by keeping the abortion in the dark. And it doesn't do anything to protect the individual at all. I'm Kat, and this has been Conservative Clips, Cat Clips, reminding you that real healthcare, it doesn't kill people, and real healthcare means empowering women and supporting women, not selling them lies in a bottle. Stay alert, stay bold, and always choose light. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. Hey, go ahead and smash that like button, share this out with your friends. California Democrats, they are moving full steam ahead on these plans to enact these new redistricting maps in retaliation to what Texas had done in their state, where they added like 5 Republican seats. They passed a package of bills. That's Governor Gavin Newsom. He signed those bills this month on the grounds that they were doing it for the people. We're doing it for the people. We're redistricting for the people. Yeah, BS. The bills green light what they do. This package of bills green light a special November election where voters will decide whether to temporarily suspend the voter-approved independent redistricting commission process and allow the state to enact maps drawn by Democrat leaders, okay, in the state legislature. So they have the majority. So that's kind of how it's done here in the state of Illinois. You might be wondering to yourself, okay, how do Republicans make up 43% of the electorate, but we only have 3 Republican congressmen? I'll tell you how. It's because there's a supermajority in the state legislature, and the Democrat leaders get behind closed doors, and then they create the maps, okay? And that's how Illinois has become so gerrymandered, okay? So they're doing that, and actually there was an independent redistricting commission, but this special election would ask voters to temporarily suspend the voter-approved independent commission and allow the state, rather, to draw the maps, okay? So there are leaders who are going to be in the state legislature who are going to be drawing the maps. 2 of these leaders are reportedly going to be considering running in those districts that they redraw. Okay, so this is to counter, this move is, of course, to counter what went on in Texas, where their state legislature, which is Republican controlled, where they did this mid-decade redistricting of the maps, okay, redrawing of the maps, which is odd. And I mean, I'm not all for it, but here's why Texas did it. It's because of the illegal immigration, the droves of illegal immigrants who came across the state. They were included in the census, okay, the 2020 census, and they wanted to appropriately draw the maps to not include illegal immigrants, okay? Because how you draw the maps, you should take into account population and geographics. Okay, so Newsom, he originally touted this plan as an only if option. Okay, so they're going to do this special election only if, saying that if approved by voters, and only if Texas actually carried through with redrawing their maps, that the new California maps would go into effect. Does that make sense? So they're going to do the special election no matter what. And if the voters said yes, we can temporarily suspend the independent commission for the Democrat leaders to draw the map. And if Texas carried through with redrawing its maps, then they would enact those new maps. But as snakes often do, California Democrats, they changed the language last minute in some legislation. And it used to be whether or not, instead of it being whether or not Texas decided to proceed with the redistricting, now they changed the language to regardless whether Texas redraws the maps. Okay. So Tuesday, this week, Tuesday, KCR reporter Ashley Zavala, she shared on her X page a discovery she made on the Stop Election Rigging website set up by Newsom that urges voter support and calls on them to donate to the cause. Instead of noting that California maps would go into effect regardless of whether Texas maps were signed into law and or struck down ahead of the 2026 midterms. However, the website displayed the message, Prop 50 provides emergency maps go in effect only if Republicans move forward with their power grab. Okay, that's what it says on the website. Okay, so let me pull that up for you, actually, so you can see it, the website and what it looked like, because they changed it, as snakes do. Okay. So here's what the website looked like prior, okay? And it says this, Prop 50 provides emergency maps go in effect only if Republicans move forward with their power grab, okay, with the Texas maps and the redistricting, okay? So that's what it says there. Here's Gavin Newsom. Take a listen.
Several weeks, you said that voters would be presented with trigger language based on what Texas or other states do. Texas is halfway through its legislative process on these maps, but you've decided apparently to go forward with this anyway and have voters allow these maps to go into effect anyway, regardless of what happens in other states. I mean, even if the courts strike down what happens in Texas. So, I mean, just clarifying, these new maps take effect no matter what.
We're moving forward. Texas moved forward. Texas acted. Texas is moving forward. People are suggesting Texas is not going to move forward because of what we just did. Come on.
Several weeks, you said that
Okay. So there you have it. He said, that contradicts what his website said, contradicts what he just said there. He confirmed the prior week, to the website being launched, that California's gerrymandered maps would take effect no matter what, even if the court struck down what happened in Texas. And that has happened where the courts have struck it down. Of course, there's going to be appeals and all of that. So in summary, why this is such a big deal. In summary, this was a site created to drum up support for Newsom's Stop Election Rigging scheme. And it was found out that the site was rigged itself. Okay. They rigged the site in order to deceive the voters into financially giving and supporting this effort. So yeah, go figure. Ironic, stop the rigging. You rigged your site, you were deceptive, and you were trying to purposefully deceive voters into financially giving. Because, I wouldn't give to it at all, me personally, but there might be somebody out there who would give to the site with this clause, hey, only if Republicans move forward or if the courts don't strike this down. Only if I would, do that. But if, they didn't do it, then I wouldn't financially give to it, because then we're suspending an independent commission, which is fair for no reason, right? We're just allowing the state of California to gerrymander and to not offset what Texas is doing, but really to just gerrymander. And what they were trying to do with this website was deceive voters into giving financially to a cause that wasn't even actually the cause that they said it was. So that's what the big hubbub here and why I'm making a big deal out of this. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Not true. Trump was convicted of rape. Not true. Okay. Convicted of rape, he'd be sitting in a jail cell. Like, come on now. Everybody knows that that's not true. Otherwise, he'd be sitting in a jail cell, not Oval Office. Okay, best friends with Epstein. Not true. He turned Epstein in and worked with the feds to convict him, and convicted him under his administration. His first administration, by the way, has more felonies than Dahmer. Oh my gosh. What Reddit are you on? Like, what subreddit are you on? Because I'm telling you, there is this faction of leftists out there. And it's quite disturbing because I know for a fact, probably this guy was on Reddit, the shooter, the Minnesota gunman, definitely on some sort of Reddit. And they're like, are really, really creepy people out there about the Jeffrey Epstein client list and how like they're obsessed with getting that released. So he actually wrote on his gun, release the list. Okay, so there's these leftists out there who are obsessed about Donald Trump and the Jeffrey Epstein client list. And I've already walked you through this multiple times, and I guess I have to do it every day because the leftist stumbles upon here and they aren't educated. Donald Trump at this point has nothing to do with client list, okay, or with these sealed court documents. Okay, so not even the FBI can unseal court documents. The only people who might, even after jumping through a bunch of hurdles, who might be able to unseal the court documents would be the intelligence agencies. Things like human trafficking cases, things that involve sex victims. And I, much as the next guy, want to know who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked the humans to. Okay, he was convicted of human trafficking. I want to know who he was working with just as much as the next guy. That is not in Donald Trump's wheelhouse. Okay, the president has no authority. This is all through the judicial branch and through the intelligence agencies who concealed those documents or sealed those documents, court documents. Okay, the executive branch has no part in this. Okay, none. And maybe the intelligence agencies could unseal these court documents, but it's really the judicial branch who has to decide to unseal those court documents and release those names. There are other ramifications we have to consider when unsealing those court documents. Are there going to be people named where there's, national security, international security risks, where you're going to start taking CEOs out of boardrooms? Okay, banking CEOs out of boardrooms. Could it lead to global economic collapse? I think yes. I think that's why the intelligence communities haven't forced the hand of the courts, the judicial branch, to unseal those court documents. I think it's because it's a matter of national security and international security, which Donald Trump might have been briefed on. But I don't know because I'm not a part of these conversations. And I don't know what the intelligence community knows about those court sealed documents. Okay. And if they've been able to unseal them, and if the intelligence agencies have been able to see their eyes. But if it involves prime ministers of foreign countries, if Jeffrey Epstein trafficked the humans to prime ministers or leaders of foreign countries, or if he trafficked the humans to the young girls to banking CEOs, people in the finance sector, top people, I mean, that could lead to global economic collapse. It could lead to war, outright third world war, World War III. Okay, so there are lots of things that we have to consider when releasing the Epstein client list. Okay, me personally, I don't give a damn about World War III. I don't give a damn about global economic collapse. If I was in the chair, I would definitely release the names. However, I'm not in the chair, and global economic collapse would mean people would die. Okay, so you have to kind of weigh this. And I don't think Trump has been briefed on anything with those court sealed documents. I don't even think the intelligence communities know anything about the Jeffrey Epstein client list or the sealed court documents. I don't think that they can get their hands on it because it is quite literally out of their hands, and it is through the judicial branch. So like there's a little thing called separation of powers. We live here in America where that exists. And it's really sad that these Redditors don't get that. And they have been led astray. And they're in these echo chambers, and they're starting to get fanatical and obsessed. And they're starting to draw up like these conspiracies that Trump is in on it, and that they're best friends, and that he's like raping women, and that they were all in on it. And this is where you start to get mental illness, and you start to get mass shooters who carve into their weaponry and into their magazine clips, release the list. This is where you start to get fanatical people because they're not looking at this objectively or with any kind of logic and understanding of the separation of powers and why names haven't been released. Okay, I want them released as much as the next guy. It's not Donald Trump's fault. It's not the FBI. Maybe Tulsi Gabbard would be the one to get these. But even then, there's hurdles that the intelligence community has to jump through. And once they jump through those hurdles, then I'd imagine they could brief the president if it's an issue of national security. I don't think that's happened. We don't know if that's happened. And most likely, the truth is that those court sealed documents, the intelligence communities can't get their hands on them. The people in the Trump administration who are a part of the intelligence communities now, Tulsi Gabbard. So, yeah. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for us today. I appreciate you being here. Subscribe to the channel. Share this out with your friends. And as always, I love you. And we'll see you again tomorrow morning, bright and early, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m.